Hey everybody, it's Miss Adine, and today I'm drawing a tree. It's what I'm starting with. It's the only idea I have. So I'm doing the outline of each branch, going up for one side and down for the other, and going around. It's a little wonky. My branches aren't perfect. Some are a little bit fatter or skinnier than they should be at the wrong places. But since I'm doing this with one line without lifting my pencil off the paper, I'm going to leave it exactly as it is. So I'm using a Sharpie pen for this, and now I'm adding a background, so it's like a little bit of a hill. So here I'm just drawing a big fat sort of mix between a penguin and a bird. And that shadow is a cat passing by. Yep. That is Orange. He's going to come and hang out because he is very interested in our art making. So here's my other pigeon bird. This one looks more like a bird. The other one looks more like a pigeon. And like I said, it's just, I don't have a full idea when I start. I just sort of start. And here I'm adding little feathers. And this is real time. I did not speed it up. People have been telling me that my videos are a little too fast for you to see how it gets done. So I decided I would leave most of this in real time. And as you can see, it takes a lot of effort and little lines to make that full pattern on the wings. I think it's worth it to spend time on your art making. It's very relaxing. I really, really have a good time making art and being creative and using lots of colors and lots of lines and playing with new materials. Whatever I can get my hands on, it's always fun. Here I'm adding some pattern lines for his chest. Orange is still staring at me. I wonder how long he's going to stay and sleep with us today. It is his nap time, after all. Yep, there he goes, sleeping. He's such a cute little baby. So you can see, like, I started to put my pen down and then I changed my mind and put it somewhere else. So here I'm adding some little lines. And I'm not really that happy with the shape of his head. So I'm adding a little bit extra to it. Sort of like big hairy feathers on the top of his head. And I like that because it changes the shape of his head a little bit, so I don't have to worry about crossing off or adding or erasing, because you can't erase when you use a pen. You just have to turn every single line into somehow art. And that's the fun of this sort of game, is that you start with a basic idea, like I started with a tree, and then I just sort of randomly put these two bird-like figures in. And then, they're sort of mirror images of each other, not identical. They're not twins, but, they face each other. They have the same beaks. They have, the same sort of pattern on their wings and patterns on their chest. And now I'm going through and doing some details for the face. I like to break down every single object or figure with patterns, so I have more opportunity to add color later. And this video has the color as well as the outline beginning. Here I'm adding some just little details for the eyes and separating the legs. So you can see that they're not the same exact creatures, but they look like they'd be friends. So now I'm adding a pattern in my tree. So this would sort of be like a big knot or maybe even a hole, but more like just the pattern of the bark. And it's going around. And then I'm going to start somewhere else. And I'm just copying the outline of the shape of the tree where it meets the dirt. And making some lines in here. Now you can see from the way I start in one place and move to another that I do not know exactly what this is going to look like when I'm finished, that I'm thinking about it and changing my mind as I work. And just with your lines, just go slowly and work neatly and evenly, right? So I'm trying to keep my lines to be at the same distance from each other. And sometimes I make it and sometimes I don't. Like that one's way too close to the tree where it starts, but it's okay. And they get wider and narrower, but I'm trying to keep it the same width. I'm also doing this freehand and just randomly making sort of patterns. Here you can see like I'm not sure where to start, so I go back and forth. Every line is not perfect. If you know, sometimes I go back and I add and change a detail. And here I'm just making sort of stripes that go up and little loops and circles and patterns. So I'm thinking about what a tree looks like, and trees totally have a lot of texture in them. None of them look flat. They all have like weird shapes in the bark that are sort of patterns for each kind of tree. And this is not a realistic tree. I have no idea what it would be. It's too fat. There should be more branches. So this is totally a tree made up from my imagination. And I'm making it very knotty looking. And I want it to look like if you touched it, you could feel all those different bumps. And the fun is going to be when I color it in. And coloring it in, I can use any colors. I don't know what I'm going to do and what colors I'm going to use until I start. So you can tell that like the ends, my patterns and the ends of the branches are nowhere near as neat as they are in the bigger areas. And I'm just going to work with that. And we'll see how the color helps define those shapes. So, you know, like I did get some feedback that my videos were a little bit too fast and I shouldn't speed them up as much. And I was worried that if they were slow that you wouldn't necessarily want to watch the whole thing or have time. If you have a feeling about whether they should be faster or slower, or maybe you want two versions posted, so the quick version which is sped up and then a longer version that's more like real life, let me know in the comments. There's no way I can tell what you're thinking if you don't tell me. And I really do like the feedback. It's what artists do. They share their work with each other and then they give each other suggestions and ideas. So here I'm making a huge circle in the back, and it could be the moon or the sun, sort of like it's up close, and we won't know until I add the color. So here I started doing this pattern, almost the same as in the bird's wings, but then I'm turning it more into circles as I go. And they really touch in many places and go around and behind this bird. And the pattern isn't the same from beginning, oh hey Midnight, to end. It can change a little bit. It doesn't have to be the same. So Midnight is officially Orange's sister. They're from the same litter. She is all black and she doesn't show up that often. She's more of a floor kitty. It takes a lot to get her to come up on my desk. She's very interested in what's going on. Just her tail showing now. So my pattern has changed from these like overlapping circles to separate circles. And that sort of works. It doesn't have to be the same thing consistently. You're allowed to change your mind and alter what you're doing as you go. So the one decision I did make about this picture before I started was that I was not going to use gel pens to color the whole thing in, because that was a really long process and it was really hard to get an even coat of color without denting my paper. I think what I'm going to use is just regular markers, and then I can use the gel pens to layer on top of that even some more patterns and detail. right? So, and I like, and it's really hard to see exactly what this is going to look like when it's all black and white lines, like where the tree starts and ends versus the circles in the background. So you have to like really pay attention to your own work as you can go, because if you're not careful, you could be coloring the circles and wind up coloring the tree the same color, depending on how separate your shapes are. And what's funny about this is the drawing part, the basic black outline drawing part is so much faster than the coloring in part. The coloring in part is where you sort of need to make your decisions on color and layers and design of pattern in colors. Where here, I'm just sort of drawing from my imagination. So on this side, I have a couple little things that overlap, and then I go right into separate. So there's a little bit of symmetry between the left and the right in terms of the pattern. But other than that, as I work, I'm making it up. Here it's complete. This is what it looks like, and now I get to start coloring it in. So I am using brown from my tree, and I am going to just, do an every other sort of design with the dark brown, and then I think a lighter brown, but you can always change your mind as you go. So you can see that each little design has to get colored in. So when you're making one of these, if you want to make it, the more detailed you make it, the longer it will take to color in. So had I done big stripes that went down my tree, I could have used a marker and finished it a lot quicker. But to me, it would be less interesting to look at and not as much fun to make. So depending on how much detail you use while you're drawing it initially is the amount of time it will take to complete your work. Now for me, it's not about being done fast. It's about making something that I really like to do. So not only do I want it to be fun to make, I want to be really happy with it when I'm finished. So I could do something quick, and sometimes I do fast art that I love, but most of the time it takes a little bit more time than that, especially when you're not doing something that you draw all the time. If you have one figure that you draw constantly and you've gotten really good at drawing this one character, then you can draw it pretty quickly because you know exactly what it's going to look like. But when you try new things, it's never as fast. And if you want it to be as fast, then it's probably not going to be the best artwork you've ever done. It might be, it might not be, but most of the time it takes a little bit of effort and a little bit of slowing down. So this is a really fine tip marker I'm using. I just got these the other day. I really like them. These are the Bic intensity markers. Amazon and Staples have them. They're not expensive at all. They don't bleed too much. They do go through, they'll show up on the page of your sketchbook. So when you use these markers, you can only use one side of your sketchbook paper, not both sides. But they will not bleed through to a new paper. And they have a nice tip that lets you get right in and do nice detail work. And I really like these markers, and you can see them going over around in my the edges of my branches, and I'm going really slowly here. The pattern is a little small, and it's more like shapes than a pattern because it doesn't really repeat. And it's helping to define it. It's not perfectly neat. I can see that. I do like to step back and look at my work. It's possible that you could start something and then just really not like it. And then you've got to make the decision of whether you're going to spend the amount of time to finish it or whether you're going to start a new one. Generally speaking, I try to finish everything I start in a sketchbook. I don't like to have a lot of pages that have starts, like half finished work. If I do that, I will go back and finish it in a different style or later. So if I started, let's say, this tree, and I wasn't really liking the way my tree came out, I might restart it on another page, you know, like this one, and then later go back and turn that tree into something different, or, you know, color it in another way, or use some watercolor paint on it. And that way, that like every page of my sketchbook will be finished and complete and something that I like. I really dislike having a sketchbook that has unfinished work in it. So I do go back and finish every single sketch in my book, even if it's in a different style than the one I originally was planning on using. So, and I'm really impressed with these markers. You know, I think I spent $10 and got like 18 markers, and you can't go wrong with spending 50 cents a marker. And they seem to, you know, have really nice colors. This is a very nice brown for a cheap marker. And maybe I shouldn't call them cheap. I should just call them you know, unexpensive, because they don't feel cheap in any way, shape, or form. They feel really nice. So here I went over some of that pattern to change it, because I wasn't liking those little stripes and they didn't repeat anywhere. Now I'm going back down to the bottom. And, you know, just seeing the color in my branches helps define the shape of the tree from the background, and I like the way that looks. At every step of the way, you know, look at your work and decide what you think. You know, like, what are you doing really well, and what do you need to go back and add or change? So I can see up here that even in my branches, where some of my marker are, you know, a little bit fuzzy or, you know, not as solid, I'm sure I'm going to go back and rework that and add a little bit more color and define those lines, either with the same brown or the color I use in between. So as I'm watching this video, I can see that I did make a somewhat small mistake in in the tree, where I was doing in every other pattern. I sort of have two white with a black, and I know I'm going to fix that later, but I didn't see this while I was making it. And things like this happen, and that's why, you know, that's how artists are really good at, you know, fixing little, I wouldn't say mistakes, but inconsistencies in an artwork. They can always go back, you know, and notice something that they didn't do the way they planned. So right now I'm waiting to see how I fix that, because I don't really remember. And here I'm just going over and doing the initial little circles I did. And like I said, the more detailed the design, the longer it takes to color. Right? And if I have really big marks, then it's much quicker to go through and do. But when they're smaller, the smaller the pattern or design, the longer it takes to fill in. You know, and I love to make bright, fun, wonky, happy, silly artwork. And I think this is a good time to try to express joy in your artwork now that we're all home. Oh, and here's Orange. Orange is going to sit with me. He's, you know, he's always going to find a way to be close to me when he wants to be. He's very silly. So for the bottom, for this mountain, I'm going to do like big, wide green stripes that come out. And I'm not worried too much about having a pattern in these stripes, even though there's such large areas of one color, because I've already decided that I'm going to use the gel pens on top to add some texture in another way. I'm not sure exactly how yet, and that'll figure out as when I get there. And Orange is just so silly. He's such a cuddly, lovey cat. You know, I never knew cats could be so affectionate. And this cat just really, really wants to spend time with everyone in the family. He wants to sleep with you and sit with you and eat at the same time as you and just generally be around. And there's not one thing, you know, you could do this cat that he would be annoyed with. That is kind, at least. You know, pet him, pick him up, carry him around. He's all good. You could even put this cat in the bathtub and he'll be purring and happy. We've had to give him a bath a couple times and he doesn't complain. He doesn't complain when you cut his nails, give him a bath, put him over your shoulder. You could put, you know, he's just the biggest mush. So getting back to my green. When I use my markers, I'm going in one direction. And you can see the marker, you'll be able to see the direction of my lines with this marker, I think. With most markers, you can always see a little bit of the direction that you worked in. So I'm really careful to try to go in, intentionally to go in one direction. So here I'm speeding it up just a little bit so it doesn't take, you know, as long. So you'll notice that for some of it, it's sped up and then it goes back to real time. And that's the magic of getting to edit your videos. You can go back and forth between real time and sped up time. So here's a darker green in between. And I really like the way the two greens look next to each other. They are really great colors. And I'm just having fun changing the speed on this from fast to slow and fast to slow. Imagine if I could really work that fast. That would be so intense. It'd be like better than being Flash. Imagine if Flash decided he was going to be an artist. He would like have 1 million paintings painted in a day. So here my hand's blocking some of the light. So it looks a little darker in that picture. Nothing I can do about that. Now I wonder how long Orange is going to stay gone this time. Sometimes when he leaves sitting by my desk, you can't tell that he's, you know, sitting next to me on the floor or on my table, because he does really stay close. Now I wonder what the first people who made like movies would think if they knew all the amazing tools that everybody can have at home to make their own movies. Like, you know, Charlie Chaplin, they were doing black and white silent films that took crews of people and lots of time, where we can make voiceovers and we can film things and we can do it so fast and so efficient all by ourselves. Technology is so fun. You know, what a great way for artists and people to share everything they want to share, and so easily. So here, I've moved on to, I think now that I'm using this peach color, is going to be more of a sun than a moon. And I chose orange, you know, like this peachy orange color, because I really like the way orange and green look next to each other. You know, they are pretty much complementary colors. It's really, you know, like green and red, but green and orange is pretty close, and they really vibrate and make each other stand out. And I wanted to make this like very sort of pop art like. I love pop art. Anything that's like, you know, where colors pop. So filling in the small spaces behind with this marker is much quicker than it was using the gel pens. So it's a little bit more satisfying to draw, and less frustrating. I mean, I had fun. I always have fun making all my art. But when, drawing in a space takes that long and you have to work so hard, it's not always as fun or satisfying. But these big shapes that I'm coloring in with this big marker work really well. And it's like such good instant satisfaction. Sorry, I can talk. There you go. So I think after spending, I don't know, let's see, the end of February, so pretty much March and April and May. So it's been almost 3 months that I haven't been able to really draw or use my right hand efficiently. And I think my left is getting really good. And I'm, soon enough, I've been working out on my right hand, getting a little bit of mobility back. Soon I'm going to restart trying to draw with my right hand, and I wonder what that's going to look like. Maybe I'll be truly ambidextrous and I'll get to be able to draw and paint with both hands at the same time. That could be just fun and silly. But for a new lefty, I'm pretty impressed with myself. And I like the way this peach against the brown is, because it's so much lighter than that dark brown, it really does look like it is behind my tree, or the tree's in front, right? And the side of the tree is darker because it is not directly in the light. It's blocking the light. So if the sun was in front of it, it would be shining on top of it and there would be a shadow behind it. And this is not a realistic drawing, so there still could be a shadow. I just didn't bother working with anything like that today. Shadows are a great way to show light and three-dimensionality. But this is not about being realistic. This is about fun and sort of symbolic art with lines and shapes and patterns. It's very abstract-y. And I don't know what kind of name this would have. And I don't really title things in my sketchbook. I know some people title everything they do. If you come up with a title for this, you can always put it in the comments section underneath the video, because I'd love to hear them. So while I'm working, I'm trying to decide like what color I should use, in the circles. I haven't decided yet. And sometimes I slow down while I'm working to make those decisions, because I like to, go from beginning to end and finish one thing. Sometimes I let something sit and go back to it the next day, depending on when I start. And other times, I start in the morning and I work most of the day and I finish something. And if you're really busy, being out and about, and you can only draw for a few minutes at a time, well, this is the perfect thing to do because it's marker. You can always leave it sitting like on your desk or at your kitchen table, in your little sketchbook with a couple markers in a bag, and go back to it whenever you want to. And that's the fun of like markers. If like you were doing paint, and you mix this color, you would want to like continuously work until all the color was done, or you'd have to wait for it to dry in between. But with markers, you can do it all at once, or you can go back and finish it whenever you have time. And those bird creatures, those upright standing bird creatures are, a little disturbing. They're fun and they're happy. But I think if I ever saw birds that big standing next to a tree, that I might be a little scared. Because what do birds that big eat? Really big worms? Snakes? Who knows? Those two look like, what would they want to eat? Maybe some spaghetti. So I'm almost done. Whenever I just finish one little section, it's so satisfying. Now I'm going back through and adding, where I see the white of the paper showing through, I'm just kind of, adding little touches to finish that. And now I'm using this really bright yellow inside. So you can see how fast it is. I've sped the video up again. Modern technology makes me so happy. Just speed it up and film in. And what fun. So I know some people, when they make YouTube videos, have a button you can click to make the video go faster for double speed. I don't know how to do that, so maybe if someone knows how to do that, they can, tell me in the comments, or maybe I can look it up myself. But if you want to see something like that, leave a comment. Here's Sleepy. He's coming to check out what's going on. He is not interested. He'll be back or not. Sleepy's silly. He wants attention, but if you're not going to give it to him, he's going to go and find someone else who will, or just go take a nap in the sun. So I noticed that I forgot to do in between his legs before, and by finishing those circles, I could see it. So I just switched colors and went back. That's something about art. You can always go back and work on something that you didn't add in. So on the side, you can see I've got a piece of paper next to my notebook, and there's a little bit of marks there. What I do is, especially with a new set of markers, or, all the time, I will test colors to see what I like next to each other, what colors work well together. And then I can use them. So if I'm not sure, what I'm in the mood for or what colors I want to put next to each other, I use a piece of scrap paper or the back of a page and just test them out and see how they look together. And it's, it's just a way that you can take control of even a doodle. And these are, doodle line drawings. I start with no idea or just one idea of one object and then work out from there. And people work in all different ways. Some people really like to think about every single sketch they make and know exactly what it's going to look like before they start. And that's, that's one way of working. Other people just sort of have no idea and start. I'm somewhere in the middle. Tell me how you like to work. Do you like to think about it from beginning to end and have a really clear idea in your head? Do you like to use a sketchbook and work from your imagination and then use those sketches to make larger paintings or different sketches? Because sometimes we can brainstorm and come up with a lot of ideas, little pictures and thumbnail sketches, and then choose one and make a bigger image. And I know I do that a lot, or I do that sometimes, but my sketchbook sort of is my brainstorming. Each day that I make a sketch is an idea that I could use to make a larger painting or a series of sketches from. And I do like to make larger paintings that aren't in my sketchbook. And this would be a really fun painting to make. Huge. And you would never get the same exact pattern, but you would get the idea of it. And, I should buy a scanner so I can, draw this in and scan it before I color it in, to make a coloring book. Because it would be kind of fun to have your own coloring book. That way you can, go back and do the same picture with a lot of different colors and see which one you like the best. Almost like an Andy Warhol, where he did, portraits of people, and each one was just different colors. You could draw your own and make your own Andy Warhol self-portraits. You could do so many different things with it. It would be a lot of fun, either with a scanner or a copy machine, any way you wanted to do it. We have the technology, so you don't have to painstakingly redraw something over and over again. So here, looking over at my work, I'm almost done with the background, and I get so excited when I get like almost done with a section. It's sort of silly. It's sort of like I know I'm not rushing, but I like to see how it looks for each area, so that I can figure out what's next. So as I'm working on this, I'm trying to decide, which part I'm going to color in next, what colors I'm going to use. And I make these decisions. Like, had I made this the moon, I would have used grays and maybe dark blues, and then it would have been more like a nighttime picture than a daytime picture. And, and that's Sleepy. He came by to check things out, and he's getting a little pet before he goes off to take a nap. Sleepy's not a big table sitter. He'll do it sometimes. Cats are just, they understand what's important. They are. And if they want attention, they're going to come and demand it. And he is Orange's litter mate. He's Orange's brother. And they have a sister, Midnight. And the three of them are all completely different looking. Because Orange is an orange tabby, and Midnight is, all black. They all have a little spot of white somewhere. And they're all very big for being cats. And they all act more like little puppies. So here I can fill in more than one at a time, and you can see how fast I made that part, because the shapes overlap. So I didn't need to have any color in between, so that's much faster. And it's so fun that I can speed things up and slow things down back and forth. I'm so fast. So I really like the way this is looking. I've chosen a really dark magenta color for the background. I guess it would be sort of the sky. And I know that doesn't really make sense to have like a daytime picture with such a dark background. And over here you can see I made a mistake. I did the orange, and I filled in that little area that wasn't supposed to be part of the sun, so I'm just going over it. And I'm going, I'm not working that fast, that. So, when you're working from your imagination and you're making things up, you don't have to follow any of the rules. So I have a bright sun with a really dark sky. And the dark sky isn't blue or black. It's a magenta. And it's a really dark magenta. And it's a little bit hard to see the beauty of this color in this film. And I'm not quite sure why. You can see a little bit of it here. Other than the lines, I am not using any black inside of my doodle drawings. And some people like to work with a thicker marker, like a Sharpie marker, when they do their outlines, so that when you're done filling everything in, you can still see most of the lines. I work with a really fine tip Sharpie pen, and some of the times you can see the lines, and sometimes you can't. Like when it's really light colors, you can. But I'm not that big on the thick lines in between. Sometimes I do it just to, it's quicker and it's more fun on some level, but I like the little lines. And that's, everyone makes their own artistic decisions on whether you want to use thicker black lines or thin lines, or whether you want to show your lines. And here, this area is really awkward for me to fill in without flipping it upside down, so sorry about that. And now I'm using a blue to do my bird's hair. Well, actually bird's feathers, because birds don't really have hair, do they? So, and I like this dark blue, so I'm skipping a couple spaces and using it again. And you can see on the side that I stopped the video and tested markers to see which colors I was going to use. And I made a little patch to see what they looked like next to each other. I do that all the time. It's a way of testing out colors without actually putting them inside your art, and just in case you didn't like that color. And even though the two birds have the same colors in their tail feathers, they start with different colors, so they're not identical. Like the one bird has dark blue at the top, and the other one has that greeny, turquoisey color, and then it, they go down. Now I'm using pink, and I'm doing some little stripes. And I didn't decide to use the pink until like the last second. I never know exactly what colors I'm going to use before I start. I know that I'm going to use a lot of different colors, but I don't make the decisions first. Some people will take a pile of markers and decide which colors they want and put them next to it so they're right there and handy. I just sort of, maybe I stop my video and pick up a new marker. I try to make it so that there isn't a lot of time for me choosing my materials in this video, that I start and stop it enough just so, you're not looking at me, picking out a marker from a bin. And here is just a different lavender in between the pink. Oh, and I love the way that looks against the orange and blue. So now I'm going to use the same blue in the chest. I want to have the same sort of stripey. I want to repeat that pattern and the colors for the chest of my creatures. And I forgot a spot, and that's the thing. Just went back and filled it in. So I know for me, I use a lot of pink against, like purple or pink close to, different colors. I think pink looks good next to browns and greens and oranges and blues. So, what are your favorite colors that you like to use in your artwork? What are color patterns and that you use over and over again, that if people were to look at your artwork, they would recognize that, like, oh, this is your artwork, because you always like to use, pink and tan together, or you always use a lot of green, or, there's a flow to the lines you use. Like, what makes your art look like yours? Is it your colors? Is it your lack of color? Because some people really don't like to have that much color. Some people like to do a lot in black and white with maybe one color as a focal point. Now I'm watching this video and I'm thinking, I hope I go and get that one little spot I left. That one little white spot's going to bug me until I see it and fix it. And I'm sure I do. At least I hope I do. Because if I don't, I'm going to go back and do it without the camera being on. Oh, and is that oh, that's orange. Orange is back. He's going to sit with us for a while. So I wonder what kind of creatures they are. They're a little bit more like birds than penguins, but birds do not stand upright. They are way more horizontal than they are here. Here they're like vertically standing, more like people. Maybe they're just standing there next to that tree waiting for the, I don't know, the spring. They're waiting for the leaves. They're waiting for the fruit. Maybe that tree has a lot of yummy fruit in the summer. Maybe it's a pawpaw tree. And I know pawpaw trees are skinnier. But maybe it has some magical fruit that's going to let these birds, grow arms and opposable thumbs. Or maybe it's like, going to give them superpowers, like the pawpaw, pawpaw fruit. Or the gum fruit. Maybe they'll get stretchy powers. So here I'm using some of the same pink from the top, And I'm not using it in a pattern. I am, well, it's sort of a pattern. I'm like skipping every other one, but it's not really going to be an exact pattern. Orange's tail. He's like, but what are you doing, Mama? Pay attention to me. Kitty cats are very silly. So I know that both birds are going to have the same colors in their feathers. So instead of finishing one at a time, I'm using the same marker that's open to just fill in a bunch of these little shapes on both birds at the same time. Oh, what a handsome boy Orange is. I think if when I go back to work, my kitty's going to really have separation anxiety. It's going to be a really hard thing when your kitties are not used to, when your animals are not used to you leaving the house every day for most of the day. When your kitties and puppies get used to you being home all the time, they're going to be really sad when we all go back to work and school and life. So, you know, I love the way this picture's coming out. It is such a happy, bright picture. You know, and it has everything I love about what some of the art I make. It has, it's bright. It's really colorful. It has, you know, wonky, weird animals. And I think it, you know, when I look at it, it makes me happy, and I hope that by me sharing it with you, it makes you a little bit happier. And I hope it gives you ideas for your own creativity. Adding this dark pink over here. So even though they have the same exact colors, they're not in the same places, so they do look like different birds. They don't look like identical. And they totally have different feet. This one has way more penguin-y feet or duck feet, and the other one has like these skinnier feet. So here I'm adding this dark color again. It's sort of, you know, I think it's the same magenta as the background sky. And I'm adding it and filling in the last few feathers on my birds, and adding some stripes on their feet and their legs. I'd much rather use a really dark magenta or brown or blue than black sometimes. I think it just adds a little bit more to it, and this is the kind of work where I don't want to have much black. So even for the eye, I use that dark magenta. And here I'm just making them have a really nice pink beak. You know, and Orange is going to just sit with me. It's so nice that he came back. Maybe he was thirsty. So here I've chosen a really light tan, and I'm going over it. I don't have to be so careful using the light brown between the dark brown, because if it overlaps, it doesn't show in the dark brown. If I was doing it the other way, and I used the light brown first, I'd have to be much more careful with the dark brown. Right, because you can see I'm going sort of right over the dark brown, and it'll fill in any gaps. And if I've left, you know, if there's a white spot, it'll fill it in with the lighter brown, and it'll be less noticeable. There's no, so, you know, the same as in painting, a lot of times, you know, you start light and go dark. When you use markers, you can start dark and then go light, because, you know, going right over it. It makes it really speedy and really quick, and it adds a different feel for it, but at the same time, it's just so quick. And it just, you know, goes right over that dark without changing it. And see, I've even sped it up, so I'm like speedy, speedy, speedy. And Orange is just so calmly sitting next to me. What a sweet, sweet kitty. You know, if you have animals, you know, cats, dogs, birds that come and sit with you when you work, you know, share a picture. Tell me about them. He's chewing my pen. He's a silly kitty. He's like, you put that too close to my face, I'm gonna chew it. So now I'm just going over and seeing if there's little, you know, lighter spots or white spots I want to fill in. So this is the first layer. And without a doubt, I could leave it here, but instead I've decided to go back over it and use some gel pens. So here I'm using a yellow gel pen, which is a little bit fluorescent-y, but it's really shiny, and making, you know, squiggly lines all over my yellow circles. And you can see it, and it just adds like one more little detail. It makes it a little bit more interesting. It gives it, you know, just some more visual texture and something else to look at. And that's the thing about drawing and painting. There's always like something else you could do, you know, and it's up to you as an artist to decide when you're going to stop and when you think you're done. I know from the beginning that I wanted to layer gel pens on top. They're bright and they're fun and they're cheery. And then now I'm deciding where I'm putting them. So I could go through and add some gel pens to every single piece of this, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just going to add them in a couple areas sparingly. Because I don't want to cover up all the marker. I just want to add something to it. And part of using, you know, creating art is trying out different materials and exploring and seeing just what they do on their own, what they do together, how can you layer them and use them in different ways. You know, like how does a gel pen look differently on top of other markers than it does over, let's say, a color pencil? Or maybe if I did this completely in black and white and then used, you know, bright gel pens to add a little bit of texture on top, that could be really cool. And you never know what you're going to love until you explore and experiment and give it a try. And there is, you know, and for people who like to make art, it is really fun, you know, to try new things and see what you can do. You can see my side paper is like built up, you know, a few little lines of testing for colors. I tend to do this on the back of like a sketch in my sketchbook. That way I'm not ever really wasting my paper. And I think that looks really cool. I love the way it just gives a little bit extra pop to those sun circles. So here is like where I'm thinking of like what is next. And I've decided that I'm going to make little dots on top of the light green with an even lighter green. Now this green that I'm working with is a cool green, meaning it doesn't look as warm as the green background. The green background looks like it has a lot of yellow in it, and it's a very warm green, where the one that's going on top of it feels like it has a little bit of white in it, so it's almost like a tint. And it's a much cooler green. And it's hard to see what it's going to look like until I have all those stripes filled in with that color, with those same dots. And I like it because on some level now I'm looking at it and it reminds me of like a field of like tiny little daisies or flowers. Gel pens can be so much fun. So as I work, I notice that using my left hand, I try to work in a way that you can see what I'm doing as I do it. And it's a little bit more difficult because it's not quite a pattern. And sometimes when I'm working, my hand, like right now, is covering what I'm doing. If I work from left to right, my hand covers what I've just done. And when I work from right to left, you can see what I'm doing, and so can I. So it's an awkward thing I've never thought about before, that we're used to moving our hand in a certain direction so we can see what we're working on. Now, I'm not, using my left hand is still new. I mean, I've always used my left hand for something, just not for drawing or writing or anything that's fine-tuned skills. And here I am, if I go from top to bottom, I can see what it is I'm working on. So it works better to go from top to bottom and from left to right versus, from right to left versus left to right. But you know what I'm saying. It's like I have to be really aware of the direction I'm coloring. So if I go back up, then I cover what I'm doing. And I have to be careful with that because markers, when they're still wet, will smear. So it's just sort of like graphite when you draw will smear because you don't want your hand to lean across your art. And I love the difference in brightness between these two greens and how they work together. And you can see it, like I start going faster and faster, when I start finishing each section. And yes, some of, it goes back and forth between, real time and sped up time. So here's where I'm thinking of, do I want to add more on top of the dark green or if I want to leave it solid? And I'm deciding to leave it solid. I was thinking about using like a really dark green on top and doing the same thing. But I think it might be more overwhelming than interesting. I think it's interesting to leave it sort of like in this stripe of field than it is to add more. So here I have a very light reflective, silvery magenta. It's like the same color, but with some silver in it. And like I said, I'm working in the wrong direction again, so it's hard to see what I'm doing, but you can see it when I move my hand. So I have to remember to go from left to right, not right to left, or from top to bottom, not bottom to top. And it's a whole new habit of working. So I'm just about done. Please tell me what you think in the comments below. I'm working really hard trying to make content that, will keep you busy and happy and maybe inspire you to create your own artwork. If there's something you want to try or to see me try, tell me. I'm game. Getting someone else's ideas is always fun. So these little dots take a few minutes. It's not, so crazy. I've got one little section and I'm done. Like I said, I hope you really like this video. I hope you don't feel like it was too long. Tell me what you think in the comments box. And if you want to, hit the like button and subscribe. Have a fun, amazing, creative day.